What we're going to do today is show you how to make a bowl. Some of you have made candlesticks before, some of you have never used the lathe, so we're just going to repeat a little bit about the nomenclature, which is in your book, and I've listed the words up here. And we're going to talk about safety again because we can't hear that too often. The lathe, as you know, is made to make anything that's round. It can be half round, partially round, oval, but it has to have a round curvature at some point because that's how the lathe works. It spins. What we're going to do is use the lathe, the wood lathe that has the headstock here, the tailstock, the bed, and the tool rest. I'll talk about the various tools when we get to them, but what we're going to do first is think this is going to be spinning very rapidly. We have to think about how things can go wrong and what we need to do to keep safe. Think a moment about a car. What's the most dangerous part of a car?
The wheels.
What wheel?
The front.
The front wheel. What's the most dangerous part of the car?
Back tires. The thing that spins the wheel.
No. What?
Engine.
No. What about the nut that holds the steering wheel? What's that?
Person.
The person. The driver is the most dangerous part of a car. Same thing on the lathe. You are the most dangerous part of the car. Most dangerous part of the lathe. If you are not totally focused on this, if you're thinking about your neighbor, if you're thinking about what you're going to do when you go home, if you're tired, you're on medications like antihistamines, you're not focused, don't work on the lathe that day. Don't work on any power tool when you're not fully committed and awake to do what you're doing. The other thing we need to do is think about safety for ourselves. We're always going to be wearing a face mask so that if anything comes loose, whether it's just sawdust that could get in our eyes or the whole block could come off the lathe, we want to make sure that our face is protected. Here in the shop, or in the classroom, we have the safety shield so you can sit up in front and see what's going on. In the shop, we've angled the lathe so they're partially facing the wall so that if a block came off, it would hit the wall instead of someone else. If you're watching somebody else working on the lathe, you don't want to stand in front of it. You want to stand off on the end so you can see what they're doing, and if something goes wrong, you're not in the line of fire, the throw line, which is right here. When you first turn on the lathe, you're going to stand off to one side when you turn it on, so this starts spinning before you walk over to start working on it. Think about your clothes. If you have long sleeves, you want to roll them up, not just push them up. If you have a hoodie with long strings like you do, you're going to tuck those in. If you have long hair, you're going to put it in a clasp of some sort, tuck it down behind your neck or in the shop aprons that we have so that nothing can get caught. If you have loose bangles on your wrist, take them off. You don't want anything to get caught in the lathe. So we're going to start working here, and what we're going to be doing is working with, we don't need that, with a half log, which we have already cut into a circle, and most of our blanks have already been cut, or if they haven't, we'll cut them for you, and you'll end up with a log in a circle that looks like this. We're going to mount that on the lathe, and there's at least two different ways of doing it. One way is to use a spur drive, which is another one of the words that you need to know. That could go in the headstock. We could put the center of the block into the spur drive and bring the tailstock up, so now this is between centers in order to work on the bottom of the bowl first. Today, instead of that, we're going to use a large screw drive, and we've drilled a hole into the bottom of our block. We're going to screw that onto the screw center. And then put it onto the headstock. And then we're going to make sure it's on nice and tight. And then we're going to bring the tailstock up to support it so that we have it between centers, but it's basically held by the screw chuck, and we can remove the tailstock at a later stage. Now what we want to do is to take off these high points so we have this rounded shape to begin to make the bowl. So we're going to move the tool rest in, raise it up a little bit. And lock it down. Anytime you move the tool rest, turn this by hand. And see here it's hitting. So I have it too close and I need to back it off. Rotate that by hand and I'm clear so it will rotate. Now when we first turn this on, we're going to turn it on slow. Remember the lathes in the shop have their on-off switch by your right hand. This one's up here. I'm going to stand out of the throw when I turn it on. I've turned it slow. And it's going smoothly. I can speed it up. And I want to make it go reasonably fast. But if I turn it too fast, it starts wobbling. So I back off the speed. Once I get it balanced, then I can speed it up again. Now before we start cutting, think for a minute. When we made the candlestick, we were doing spindle turning. The grain of the wood was running parallel to the bed. It was running this way. Which way is the grain running on this block? It's running horizontally and up and down. Not along the bed, but across the bed. If we started to stick our tool into the side of the block, we'd be going into the grain and it would split off. So instead we want to start in the center of the wood and come this way with the grain so we get a smooth cut. So we're going to start in the center and go out. That's just the different and the opposite of when we did the spindle turning when the grain was running the other way. Now remember, with any of the tools, you're going to anchor it on the tool rest. You're going to make the bevel cut the wood, and then once it's touching the wood, you'll just gently start cutting. And when you start, anchor, bevel, cut. And you'll go very slow to begin with until it begins to get round. So we're going to stand away, we turn it on, and anchor, bevel, cut. To start with, it's going to be quite bouncing around because of this irregular shape. Notice that I've already taken enough off that I'm too far off the tool rest, so I'm going to move the tool rest closer, make sure that it spins, and then take some more off. And I can keep checking that it's tight enough. Anchor, bevel, cut. Notice that I'm doing that in steps. I don't know if you can hear me with the mat with it on. I'm doing it in steps. When I started here, it started getting too thick a cut, so I moved out and took a smaller cut. And I'm just going to keep whittling at that until I get this smooth. Anchor, bevel, cut. So it's beginning to get round. I still have some flat places. I'm going to reposition the tool rest. And at this point, hopefully I can speed it up a little bit. Now when you're doing this, you'll do it slow to begin with until you get a feel for it. I'm going to do it quickly so we can go on to the next step. And speed it up. almost round. I have a little place there. We'll take that off, and then we're going to make the tenon on the bottom of the bowl to grab it with a 4-jaw chuck. Okay, so it's round, and now we need to make this part the tenon. Maury's going to turn the 2 papers over, and they're different shapes for the tenon. The one on the right has straight edges up and down, and the one on the left has what's called a dovetail, where it's pointing in toward the bowl. That's the shape of the 4-jaw chuck that we have. So you look at your chuck and you see which way the jaws are shaped. In order to grab that, we need a dovetail with them going in just a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is to measure how big a tenon I want. I've taken my calipers, I've measured the inside. I need a tenon that big, which I'm going to mark with a pencil, and then we'll know where to make the next cut. So I'm going to take some wood away first. And then I'm going to take a scraper Now, if Dave can focus in right down here, and go closer, do it from overhead. Can you see that that's angled in a little bit? That's what we're going to grab. The other important part of that is the shape, but also this part right here has to be flat, because our jaws are flat on top. That's what keeps it from rocking and flipping out. So we need the jaws the right shape, and we need this flat right here. I'm actually going to make it a little flatter than it is so that it will fit even better. Okay. Now, because even though this is between centers with the tailstock, it's held by the screw chuck, I can take my tailstock away, and I can take off this extra wood here. I can either do it now or I can do it at a later stage, and actually I'm going to leave it in there because it has a mark where the center of the tailstock was. And I'm going to mark exactly where that was, because we're going to use that again when we turn it around. So now we're going to take this off, we're going to put it in the 4-jaw chuck, and we can hollow it out.